Darkest Dungeon is a dungeon crawler RPG where you don't just deal with typical video game concerns, like combat experience, and which party member gets to wear the cool new hat that an enemy just dropped, thereby forever designating them your favorite. You also deal with harsh realities, things like stress and psychoses, the grim mental and physical tolls of being an adventurer. One of the game's greatest strengths is the way that each new encounter, each new location, enemy type, or boss seeks to surprise you. So I'm going to show you an early encounter that really got to me, my first boss fight. The idea here, hopefully, is to not spoil too much. But just in case, here's a minor spoiler warning on what you might encounter as you make your own way through the game. What we're witnessing right now is a regular encounter, but it gives you a good idea of how combat works. As you can see, it's turn-based. Anybody who dies is permanently dead. I can't stress that enough. The game autosaves it and everything, so you can't even save scum this one. Everybody's arranged in a row, and that affects characters' attack ranges. Positioning is super important. I keep these guys from damaging my party and hurting our chances of coming back alive from the boss fight with a lot of stuns. Typically both stuns and debuffs are really important, especially if your enemies have a strong back row. Back row enemies often end up contributing a lot of damage over time and ranged attacks, things that really have a way of building up. And that's a problem if you're not careful, because you might think that you're doing great, only to notice suddenly that one of your characters is nearly dead. You'll also notice little effects over my characters' heads, and that means that that's their mental state being affected. So my plague doctor back there just had his mental health, his stress actually improved, as opposed to taken in a more positive direction upward, which would have driven him closer to insanity. So now we're on to the boss. When I first encountered this character, the Wizened Hag, the sort of name somebody gives themselves when they clearly ran out of fucks to give literal centuries ago, I had no idea what to expect. I knew she'd be tough, but that's all, because this game doesn't provide you a lot of intel. You've got to collect that on your own. The Wizened Hag immediately started cooking my Crusader, Reynold, one of my most valuable characters at the time. I was freaked out. I was like saying, "Oh fuck," really loudly. I think my neighbors could probably hear me, because I thought I'd lost him. He looks pretty dead in there, or at least on death's door, what with his hands melting in this grotesque stew of, flesh and, I don't know, tomato paste. But I did manage to free him. Unfortunately, he emerged in awful shape. It was at this point that I had to figure out how to deal with the Wizened Hag, and so I thought maybe it would be a good idea to take out that pot, simply because it seemed to be a source of a whole lot of damage. And I knew that my Crusader, or that anyone else in my party, probably couldn't withstand another attack like that. So I went after the pot with physical attacks, because it was in the front row. And you'll see that here in just a moment, after I finish making up my mind, which is quite a process.
Masterfully
Did some good critical damage, thought, okay, maybe this will go my way after all. I also decided to try to put a damage over time spell on the Wizened Hag, because she's back there and she's got a whole lot of HP. So it's not a bad idea to try to whittle away at her with something like that. Unfortunately, it didn't work. She had a high resistance. Then things got significantly worse because she grabbed my Plague Doctor. So I once again started to panic, and I realized at this point that honestly I probably didn't have a great chance at beating her at all. To make matters worse, she then used that huge meat tenderizer attack and put one of my characters at death door. At this point, all bets were off. I just wanted to get away, because I knew that I could not win this battle as it was, and on top of that, I risked losing characters permanently. I decided that we had to make a break for it. I mashed the retreat button. As I struggled to escape, she continued to do damage to my party, and even struck a death blow on one of my characters. That was not a great moment for me. At this point I was frustrated, I was frantic, so I got away. Unfortunately, that's when I noticed that leaving someone in that pot also led to their own permanent death. And, it was surprising, but it makes sense. That is how that would work. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the learning process works in Darkest Dungeon.
You will endure this loss.